All right, we are here.
Whoa.
We are not live. This is a recording, folks. We will be live next week. Freeform Friday will be back next week, but this is a special treat. We have with us Mikki Willis, who we featured in a preview a couple weeks ago, a trailer. You created the Plandemic Series, with the latest one being The Great Awakening. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. Good to be here.
It's good to have you. And I just kind of wanted to jump in really quickly and ask about the movie, because early on you mentioned that, I don't want to make it a pejorative, but that you were a Bernie bro. And some people hate that term. But what exactly made you change? You didn't really go into detail. You're just like, oh, I thought about these things and they didn't make sense. Was there an event or?
Yeah, and a series of them, really. I was born and raised in California, and when that happens, there's one political side that you have a choice of. There really is no other side. And so I bought into the entire narrative that anything to the right of California was racist and horrible and greedy and the source of all problems. And I stayed out of politics for a long time. And then Obama was the first person I voted for, and the first person who let me down after his first 4 years, recognizing that we had 6 new wars and he'd bailed out the big banks over the people and a lot of things that were really shocking. It left me wondering where was the hope in the change. And so I decided I would stay out of politics once again. And along comes this character named Bernie Sanders, and my friends start to get excited, and I start to listen to him. And as a kid raised on welfare with a mom with 4 kids on her own, his rhetoric really got me. And to the idea of helping people at the bottom and women and children and those who'd been left behind, it struck a chord in me. And so I became interested, and I started following him. And then I found out that he was coming through near my hometown. We lived in a little town called Ojai, California, and he was coming through Ventura County. And so I got a hold of the campaign, and I said, I'm a professional filmmaker, and I'd like to film the rally while he passes through. And they said, sure. And so I went and I filmed. And during that filming, he had a couple of celebrities on the road with him, Rosario Dawson and Shailene Woodley. And and Rosario, unbeknown to me, I was sharing a lot of videos on Facebook, father-son videos. I have 2 small boys. They're 9 and almost 12 now. But since the day they were born, I was sharing videos of the process of fatherhood, and she had been a follower of our videos. And so she recognized me and ended up saying, why don't you come on the road with us? And so I called my wife and said, they're inviting me to tour with Bernie. And my wife is awesome. So she said, go for it. And so I ended up on the road and traveled with the campaign from California all the way to Philadelphia, and stopping along the way, a lot of neighborhood local events, cookouts and speaking engagements, and just to really meet the people along the way. And as I did so, I met a lot of people with ideologies that were foreign to me. And I didn't know much about socialism. All I knew was just kind of the headline that it had failed and it was deadly. But they were calling it democratic socialism. And I thought, well, that's what does that mean exactly? And they swore that it was totally different and it would lead to a much better place. And then when they started to explain it to me, it didn't make any sense at all. And no matter how many times I would ask the question as a filmmaker, I couldn't get an answer that was satisfying. And so ultimately what they would tell me was that, well, democratic socialism, socialism is kind of when you help and you make sure there's no one too far at the bottom and no one too far at the top, and everyone has kind of this share of equality and take care of each other. And I thought, well, that sounds nice. And then they said, well, democratic socialism, I said, what's the difference? And they said, well, this is buy-in for the people, so that way.
Did they say the Nordic model at any point?
Yeah, they brought that up a lot too. They said it's that way it's not corrupted by the government. And I said, well, how do you pay for all the healthcare and the education and all these things and student loan forgiveness and all? How do you do that? And then they said, well, through taxation. And I'd say, well, who's collecting the taxes? And they'd say, well, the government. I said, well, hold on a second. You just said not by the government. Now you're saying for the government. Do you trust the government? And they said, no. I say, do you like the way the government spends our money now? No. So you want us to give them more money? I don't understand. I'm having a hard time understanding what this is about. And so, long story short, I just became disillusioned by it. And I was told by people that were a lot smarter than myself, particularly in the world of politics at the time. They said, here's what's going to happen is Bernie's going to stir up this whole grassroots movement. He's going to raise a lot of money from the people. And then he's ultimately going to give all that money to the DNC, and he's going to cash it all in and support Hillary Clinton. And I thought, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life.
Wait. They actually said that? Or
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
wait,
yeah.
that he was going to bow out of the campaign and turn it over to her?
Totally. Now, this was a good buddy of mine who was from Vermont, and he knew the Sanders family, and he was so clear. And I said, "There's no way, man. There's no way that this is going to happen. Do you hear how he talks about her? She's exactly what he's fighting against. There's no way that's going to happen." And there we are in Philadelphia.
I'm tired of hearing about Mrs. Clinton's emails.
Yeah, right. And he goes even deeper into all that crap. And so there we are in Philadelphia. He grabs a mic and he says he's endorsing Hillary Clinton. Of course, everyone was in such denial. They're like, "Did you see it? A bruise on his face? He must have been beaten. He must have been, threatened. They must have threatened his family." And I said, "Actually, I was warned that this would happen." And I took a red eye home that night.
Wow.
And jumped off the tour, and then came out to say I withdraw my support for Bernie. And that was the first time I had a taste of how fragile my relationships were in that particular cult. Because overnight, from being, yay, the hero, the poster child, the guy who's helping grow the grassroots campaign, I was a traitor. I was everything bad. They turned on me just in a heartbeat when I said, I'm disappointed. I think Bernie just sold everyone out. And they were so mad at me. And I thought, wow, that's not a good thing when you can't speak your truth. And now it's even gotten worse several years later. So that's what led me to, that was my political awakening, as I call it.
Wow. What's your background? You were an actor, or you grew up in Ojai, which seems to be the only guy I know from Ojai.
Not from Ojai. We lived there for 12 years though, but
right. Okay.
Sacramento originally. And
I got you.
I did do some acting for a short period of time. And really fell in love really quickly with being behind the scenes. And so I built my own theater at 23 years old, taught acting for about 7 years.
Gotcha.
And studied with one of the godfathers of acting, and then started directing theater from there, writing and directing for theater, and really loved it. And so that's
in Ojai or here in town?
In Hollywood. No, in Hollywood.
I'm in Hollywood now. That's why I'm asking you.
Oh yeah. So moved to Hollywood at 19 years old with stars in my eyes, and did the whole thing with $1,100 to my name, and you got chewed up and spit out by the Hollywood machine, and learned a lot of things the hard way, and became very disillusioned by it, and wouldn't play the game the way that most newcomers do. And so I had a problem with that, because I had enough morals to know when to say no, and to pass up on jobs that I didn't believe in. I remember I went in to audition to be a new young Marvel man, and when I went into the audition, they said, "Tell us why we should hire you." And I said, "You shouldn't." And they just laughed. They thought I was joking. I said, "No, you shouldn't, because I think I don't smoke and I don't support cigarettes, and so I don't even know why my agent sent me into this." It's like that kind of guy, right? So I said, I don't even really want this job. And so
wait, for Marlboro cigarettes, Mikki? Or?
Yeah, to be the Marlboro man, exactly.
Okay, on a horse with a hat. You're talking. Okay, all right.
Yeah, they go through them quickly, Mark. Come on.
I get it.
They get lung cancer, and then they got to replace them.
The other guy lasted a long time, so I guess he died, and they were.
He died of lung cancer.
Lung cancer, yeah.
Exactly. Anyway, so I didn't really play the game in Hollywood, and that became an issue. I had this legendary teacher that I was studying with came on to me. He had a reputation for liking young boys.
Wait a minute. What are you trying to say, Mikki? Come on.
That's right. And when I refused the couch, then they kind of turned on me too. And I thought, wow, what a weird industry this is. And
this
I
is
just
crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, but it's all blessing and divine, really, because it led me to do what I'm doing now. So I don't regret a second of it.
Interesting. So, okay. So the first, I've seen all three, but the first one, if I recall, was with Judy, right?
That's right.
Which is a little bit shorter than, it's not a full length.
26 minutes short.
26 minutes. The second one is?
76 minutes. That's featuring mostly featuring Dr. David Martin and following the patents and money and paper trail.
Right. Okay. So how did you get into Judy to begin with? How did you start off
Yeah,
with Mikovits?
there's a story there. So about a year and a half before the pandemic was announced, a very dear friend of mine, another doctor, said, "I have a doctor that you need to meet. I think her
Mhm.
life story would make like an Aaron Brockovich,
Ah,
incredible scripted movie."
right.
And so she came to my office and we sat down for 3.5 hours and she told me her whole story. And I loved her immediately because she was so authentic, and she always laughs because I had in an interview called her rough around the edges, and she loved that because she's like, I'm rough around the edges. I like, she's just is who she is. And then she mentioned that she was working under Anthony Fauci, and it took me a minute, and I thought, God, I know that name, Anthony Fauci. Yeah, I've heard of him. And and then she said, AIDS, whatever. And I went, oh, wait a minute. Was this the guy that was overseeing the AIDS epidemic? And she said, yeah. I said, this is the guy who killed my brother. She goes, what do you mean? I said, he's the guy who prescribed AZT and it killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people. And she said, yes, a lot more than that, but that's all we can prove.
Hmm.
And I said, wow, he's still in business. She goes, oh yeah, he's at the NIH. And this is a year and a half before the pandemic. I said, wow, I can't believe that. And so I was I was committed to another documentary at the time that was going to expose U.S. media because I'd been part of it for so long. I really was sick and tired of the way they were dividing people and causing so many problems. And so I was directing a documentary called The Narrative. And I was working with a lot of whistleblowers, and those whistleblowers were saying, because of what's going on, because Trump was able to get into a game that he wasn't supposed to be part of, and because all the investigations and impeachments and stuff like this are failing, everyone's buckle up. We're going to have a major false flag. Something's going to happen very soon. And these whistleblowers were all saying this. They said, "Oh yeah, absolutely, it's coming. It's primed. The world's primed for this." And then, and I had told Judy after our meeting, I said, "I'm so sorry." I said, "Your story is incredible, but I'm on this other documentary for at least another 8 months or so, so I can't even take this on right now." And I had to pass on her project. And so, and then the whistleblowers are saying, buckle up, be ready. And then 2 weeks later, I hear this Wuhan virus thing is going on, and it's spreading in the first case and people die. Well, I went, oh, could this be it? I reached out to whistleblowers and they said, oh yeah, here it comes. And then all of a sudden I see who is at the helm of it, Anthony Fauci. And I went, holy you got to be kidding me. Did people not understand what this man did in the 80s and 90s? And so I went, Judy lived 15 minutes from me at the time. And I said, I need to sit down with you and find out what's going on. And I sat down with her, and she started to go into what was going to happen. And I said, you know what, pause. Can you come to my studio? Let's go sit down and film this, actually, because this is too important. And I just have the intuitive hit that the world needs to hear what you're saying right now. And I'll do this. I'll pay for it out of pocket. And at the very least, you'll have a document with your story. And perhaps this, I feel bad that had to say no to your movie, and you can use this to get your movie made. Okay, that was the sole intention. So we ran to my studio, sat down, and did like another 3.5 hour interview, just her and I usually don't put myself in my films. I have before, but I did in this case because I thought, well, I don't really have much intention for this other than just to put it out there as an interview. And I didn't even really consider it to be a movie. It's just an interview with me and this doctor. And then what came out of her mouth was so shocking. Um, and so as we were putting it together in the edit bay, that's when I realized this is more than just a little interview. I need to take it seriously and turn this into a movie, put some B-roll on it, some music, and because whatever I can do to help amplify its reach, because this information, I started to do a lot of research based on what she was telling me and what she revealed in the interview. And I realized, wow, it's just, okay, this Ralph Barrick and Wuhan and, all these different institutions and universities that she said was involved, that all checked out. And she had said in the interview that she wasn't legally arrested. And I ended up getting on the phone with her attorneys and people that were involved in the case. And I said, how was it that they actually locked her up for 5 days, but there was no arrest warrant? And they sent me the information. They said, here's the warrant. It was never signed. So an unsigned warrant is an invalid warrant. So there was no It was all a scare tactic to lock her up and take away her belongings and show her that if she ever speaks against the machine of science, that she will take her down. It was all intimidation. And so I thought, wow, I'm about to step into something dangerous here. But I also knew that something really bad was coming and people were going to be harmed in a big way because I knew Anthony Fauci's history. And so that's how it started. We put that out online, and then of course we could never have predicted what happened because we were watching the counter, and there was literally a point when I thought, oh, it's broken. There's no way it went from 30,000 views to 300,000 views in 2 minutes. There's no way. It's something's wrong here. And then kept going. Next thing we know, 1 million, 3 million. What is happening here? And I'm getting calls. And at the time, it was all positive. It was people just saying, I saw, oh my God, thank you for letting me know that I'm not crazy. It all makes sense. And I believe that woman. And we looked into her past. It's all true. And thank you, thank you, thank you. And then the media comes on board. And they tell everyone, no, this guy is wicked. He's evil. He's a conspiracy theorist. And this woman is crazy, fame seeker. And it was shocking that the people know that our media is so crooked, but yet everyone just did an about face, and all the people that were online saying thank you suddenly were not saying thank you, and it just turned. It went south, and it was wild to watch that ride. But here we are, three years later, and
Sponsored by Pfizer.
exactly, no one's been able to prove one claim in any of the pandemics to be inaccurate. And I actually put a financial wager out there, put money in an escrow account, and said if anyone can prove one major claim in either pandemic 1 and 2, but at that time 3 wasn't out, you can have my money, $10,000.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s book, Real Anthony Fauci. I haven't heard about any defamation for that book either. So
exactly.
Very interesting.
Yeah, they don't want to bring that up because once you hit the process of discovery through any kind of a legal situation,
right,
that's when they'll be in serious trouble because everything in his book is straight on.
Well, the book covers in detail the AZT debacle and Fauci quite a bit. What you're discussing. I mean, the book goes into, and I'm a friend of Dr. Drew's who was with him at the time and was telling me about what it was like in the 80s in New York with AZT. So there's a lot of truth in that book, and then there's more about Bill Gates that I didn't know. The book should be, have Bill Gates on the title also, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I got a lot of pushback regarding Bill Gates. People don't push back anymore. But it was amazing at how many people came at me with, I can't believe that you are shaming one of the most generous philanthropists on the planet. This man has given his wealth away. I said, no, this man has quadrupled his wealth. He admits it. There's nothing he does that isn't about monopolizing an industry and generating a lot more profit and doing harm to people that he thinks are undeserving of time on this planet.
I just wanted to bounce this off of you. Do we need, and I don't even know what the answer is to this, but do we need some media bill of rights or some media oversight committee or something that allows? Yes. I know what your answer is going to be, but the question is, and I asked this to a bunch of people myself, I don't even know what would the form of this be, because I'm thinking that, when you make up stories or deplatform or whatever you're doing, it's almost like yelling fire in a digital theater. You know what I mean? Like you're creating havoc, the mainstream media, that is, or the mainstream digital media, by doing this. I don't know if that should be protected by the First Amendment any longer.
How about?
I think it's the equivalent of yelling fire in a crowded theater. What they're doing.
How about a digital ranking or report card? Like, as in, you lied 27 times. So then every time you come up, this person lied 27 times. But versus, something forward. That would be kind of nice to wear a digital resume, if you will, that always comes up.
I love that you're bringing this up because I've been actually talking about this a lot lately.
Okay.
In the same way that we have FCC, there's laws, there's rules of what you can say and words if I remember back in the day when Howard Stern got his first compliance rules for dropping the F-bomb too many times, and every time he dropped it, he'd be fined. And so he was very conscious that everyone on his show, he'd say, please don't say that you just cost me $25,000, right? And while I'm a big advocate for free speech, exactly what you just said, it's like yelling fire in a crowded theater.
Hmm.
When you are knowingly, and these people, most of them are knowingly lying.
Yeah,
Most of them know
absolutely. And
what's going
and
on.
they're holding FCC licenses, Mickey. I mean, why aren't there hearings dragging the Cass Paley or the William Paley of CBS
Yeah.
into the bright lights of the House and putting them under oath and confronting them with these stories?
Well, it's
Literally
about,
putting them up on a
yeah,
video screen
yeah, that's
and
right.
saying it's got to be brute force, I think.
It's about holding them accountable
Right.
to
But
the
physically doing it.
journalistic integrity,
Right.
because once you start, and I don't necessarily, I don't want to take someone's freedom away in the sense
Mm-mm.
that I want to prosecute them federally, but find them, hit them where it hurts, so that
Yeah.
when their network understands, like, this person has cost us $1 million this month for reporting things that turned out to be inaccurate. We're gonna have to tighten, the boundaries on this
Yeah.
person, and make sure they do a little damn research before they say what they say. They can prove what they're stating online. It'll force them into exercising more integrity. So
I,
I'm all for that. Knowing what they've done, and knowing damn well, particularly, let's just pick one very harmful, dare I say, absolutely deadly lie that was told about ivermectin.
mm,
Now, I will tell you, from somebody who was at the intersection at the time of all of the top dissident scientists in the world. Basically, I was talking to all of them
mhm.
and interviewing a lot of them. That was the breaking point for most of them. Hydroxychloroquine started it, and ivermectin was the final push for them, because when you have a doctor that has been dealing with a Nobel Prize winning drug that is FDA approved, that is on the
Mhm.
WHO list of essential
Absolutely,
medicines, that
absolutely.
they've been using for 40 years, hydroxychloroquine for
Drew
70, I
Drew
believe,
told me how
years,
many thousands of times he had given ivermectin to people in his
4
career.
billion doses prescribed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the media is going to go and tell everyone it was made for horses. No, it's a dual purpose medicine, like
Right,
aspirin, like anything. It can be used for livestock, it can be used for humans in a slightly different form.
right.
When they said that, doctors said, I thought they were incompetent, but now I know that they're crooked, because
Yeah,
we
yeah.
all to have these doctors get on the air to say, they have Sanjay Gupta of CNN, get called out
He's
on
right.
Joe Rogan.
He's gotta be brought, not Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is not our elected official, and I
No,
love Joe Rogan and bringing him
Sanjay
onto.
Gupta needs to be held accountable for that
He
lie.
needs to be sitting in a House hearing
Yeah,
committee under bright lights, under oath.
absolutely.
I remember the day when I read that South Africa had taken hydrochloroquine and made it a prescription drug and taken it from over the counter. That was my moment when they took hydrochloroquine off the market and made
Mhm,
it a prescription drug, and then later banned it, South Africa, knowing that South Africa is completely owned by Pfizer and is like a medical experimentation
mhm.
nation, apparently, from what I remember. That was the moment for me. Before ivermectin, it was the
Yeah,
hydrochloroquine moment.
yeah, that's what woke up, like, my dear friend who passed, Dr. Zev Zelenko. That was his moment.
Mm,
He was the one that actually, went straight to the president to say, "They are lying. This medicine, I am a highly credited family physician veteran, and I will tell you right now, they're gonna kill people by keeping this medicine from them." And then
well,
and if you understand why, the why is really simple. The
Emergency
only
use
way
authorization.
Emergency use authorization, the only way that they can
yeah,
override
oh, yeah,
our
yeah.
constitutional rights is by having an emergency use authorization. And the moment there's any other remedy out there that is slightly effective, then the emergency use authorization is withdrawn. It was
Mhm.
all about sustaining that long enough to achieve the goal of changing and stripping away our human rights and civil liberties. That's what it's
Well,
about.
there's so many levels that this operates on, this world coup that you've touched upon. I mean, there is the selling of the vaccine. There is the control of people. There is the law. I mean, there's so many different things going on, almost like a medical patriot act, being invoked in a post 2020 world. So it's not just about one thing. It seems to be a multifaceted operation going on here.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
Sure. Well, because Mark, keep in mind, not only is it a matter of controlling the medication, But if you can control the status, now you're tracking people. And who said that you stop
Right,
tracking
right.
people due to whatever they're
Yeah,
consuming? You're just
yeah.
you just keep tracking them. Okay, we've got
Right,
their
but
number
that's
and
one
keep
that's
following.
one offshoot. I mean, if it was just
Yeah.
sheer money making on the part of Pfizer, we could see through this corrupt thing of money making with Pfizer doing what you guys are saying. Pushing these two over the counter drugs off the market and forcing their experimental vaccine onto the market. But it's so much more than that, Mickey.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, it's so
It's so
much
much
more
more.
than a cash grab by Pfizer,
Oh
which
yeah.
it is, which it is. But
On
I
on
just want to
on
add
a
one more
level.
thing. I
Yeah.
just want to add one more thing to my media bill of rights. There's a couple other things, but before I forget, is the banning of intelligence operatives going into the news and coming intelligence operatives through a revolving door of coming from the CIA
Yeah.
into the newsrooms. That's got to be stopped. And also, obviously, if you have defense clearances or secrecy clearances, that has to be stopped. We can't allow this open door policy of having the CIA on CNN every single night without anybody knowing or caring that this is going on. So that's part two of my media bill of
It's
rights.
it's
Go on.
it's very important, back in
Yeah.
the 70s, they had what is called the church hearings when the Operation Mockingbird was discovered that the CIA at that time had over 3,000 journalists and writers and radio personalities under contract with the CIA. They had taken over, and they'd been doing that for a couple of decades. Finally got caught, had to under oath admit that they had all these people under contract. And at the time, the president of CBS, this is featured in Plandemic 2, the president of CBS, when he was asked, well, is this going to change now? His answer was, no, it's just we're going to have to be more careful now. That was his answer. And so for people to think that that's over, you're wrong. They just became more careful. And so they don't do direct contracts anymore. They do it through coercion and incentives.
Book
They make
deals.
sure that exactly in any way that they can possibly incentivize people or create a stranglehold on them, such that the anchors and the people, the news people, must go along with the chosen narrative, or either they're out of a job, which I would hope some of them would have enough of a spine to realize no job is worth the damage that media has done. But the problem is that a lot of them are also compromised. That there's a lot of game that's played to find dirt on people, and that's why these people have to be super careful. Is they get invited to special little parties on special little islands and special little penthouses in New York, and next thing you know, they find out that there's a video that exists of them, and how would they like their wife and the world to know?
Well,
And
I mean, going back to Mockingbird, just so you know, there was a guy named Frank Gibney who was part of the Newsweek Mockingbird division. He was
Mhm.
the father of Alex Gibney, one of your favorite filmmakers. Both Gibneys are suspect from my investigation, my sources. But Frank, I have a letter that Frank Gibney, his father, wrote to Alan Dulles. I have it hanging on my wall in a frame where he begs him to get him off this case of being in Operation Mockingbird as part of Newsweek back in the day. And Dulles says, we'll have lunch and talk about it, blah, blah, blah. And it's an interesting thing that Frank, the dad, was so involved in Mockingbird, and the father and son combination. He doesn't fall that far from the tree of his dad. He also had a stepdad who was a minister, stepdad of Alex Gibney, who was also CIA. So both the stepdad and the father were CIA. I'm just telling you, as a documentary filmmaker, these are
Yeah.
the cats. These are the cats you're competing against.
Yeah.
Well, what
It's
about the
insane.
guy who did the Soviet drugging movie that got so popular, Mark?
Which one?
Um, about the drugs, the Soviet Union, the drug program. I forgot the guy's name.
So,
Icarus is the name of the movie.
oh, yeah. What's
He's
that
total
guy's name?
CIA.
Oh, yeah. They gave him some finishing funds on his Icarus movie. What's the kid's name? Yeah, that's a story for another day. We'll get into that.
On that note, a little bit of trivia here that is something that occurred to me a couple of years ago, and it really made sense to me because I had a very limited stint as an actor, and I trained actors for quite a while. It hit me one day. I thought, how do they get these good people. Jim Carrey, I've met him before. He's a really good person, but he's so indoctrinated. Like, why is it? Like, what is the process through which so many of these actors just go so south and they become communists basically without even knowing it? They really think they're fighting the good fight, just like I did when I was on the road with Bernie. How do they get them? And it occurred to me one day. I realized all the different movies that I had auditioned for, a lot of war movies. There's a lot of that in Hollywood, and then you get an offer, and then you're sent the script, and you read the script, and then you're given by the agent or the manager, you're given some clues of where you should go research this character. This is a real character that happened, and you dig in, and they give you what they want you to research, and then you go in and you audition, and maybe you get a call back, maybe you don't, but the film goes away, and then years later you go, what happened to that film called Tangerine? Whatever. That's interesting. So many of these films don't even come out. That's so crazy. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Is this the way they get these actors to actually read their propaganda and believe it? And so then they go out on late night talk shows and they go, no, you want to know what's happening in Ukraine? This is what's happening. They speak like experts because they just did 2 months or 2 weeks of research on a script that they had no idea was written by writers paid for by the CIA or whoever it might be. It's one of the many ways that these entertainers are indoctrinated.
Well, I remember after 9/11, the intelligence organizations, taking screenwriters in Hollywood and bringing them downtown in LA to go over possible scenarios of terrorism with
Mhm.
A-list screenwriters, Mickey. I mean,
Yeah.
that was in the paper. I mean, that wasn't an imaginary thing. I mean, I wrote a script called The Recruit with Al Pacino and Colin Farrell, where we ended up in federal court where the CIA was rewriting my original draft. So I know this animal really well from the inside. That's as a whole chapter in a book called CIA in Hollywood by Tricia Jenkins, who is a professor at the University of in Austin, the University of Texas, in the film and cinema department. You could talk to Tricia if you run into her about my case with The Recruit, which was originally called The Farm. But yeah, I mean, 2 words. My favorite one, which Oliver Stone told me, was Tom Hanks as the original guy that he mentioned to me.
Yeah.
And it could be anything. It could be money, it could be fame, it could be taking a fledgling TV sitcom career and putting you in a movie, Mickey.
Yeah.
I mean, it varies according to what your needs are, I think, and who you are. But
That's right.
yeah, you're right. I mean, there are these things that you read, but it's also who you're going to play ball with and who you're not going to play ball with, which allows you to go up the ladder.
Yeah, and when you look at the certain actors who I remember in Hollywood, uh, learning of certain celebrities who live in Montana or just they fly in for the job and then they're back. And it's very interesting that they're some of the only ones who maintained sanity.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just being out of that machinery that and detached just enough to go in, do their job for 2 months, and go back to nature and take care of their cattle and
Well,
whatever it might be. But
we were just talking about David Mamet, for instance, who was
yeah,
doing a mob killed Kennedy movie just out of desperation for work. Where he's been iced out, he's been deplatformed, Mamet, and Giancana's grandson came to him with a script that the mob did it, and Mamet knows damn well the mob didn't kill Kennedy, but yet the guy wants to work. So I mean, he's separated from Giancana's grandson, and now Giancana's grandson has a separate project with George Gallo directing it. But Mamet has now spun off his own script out of it, also a mob did it kind of movie. These guys, after a while, you just want to work.
Yeah. Reaching back in time. Sorry to go back. Did you ever finish the narrative, or is that out there?
I did not, but a part of it was used in Plandemic 2. So if you the whole Operation Mockingbird
Hmm.
section, it's like an 18-minute section that was part of the narrative. So I just kind of folded that. I didn't know there'd be a Plandemic 2, and so after what happened with one, and then recognizing that the world was now fed a narrative about who I was and who Judy Mikovits was that needed to be corrected. And so part of it was like, we need to come out with a response to this. And so let's go ahead and do a number two. And then during that process, is when I started to even learn even more. And so I thought, well, I planned on getting back to the narrative, but I think at this point, if this is really to respond to this, to the truth of the media's lies, then maybe this is the narrative. Maybe we just use the parts that we'd already shot and folded in there, and so we decided to just scrap that movie and create a, a big section in Plandemic 2 about the media. So Plandemic 2 is made in little, silos of information. That's why it's also released online as short films, because we purposely, instead of intercutting everything, I wanted to make it really clear so that it was, this is about the media, this is about the WHO, this is about the CDC, this is the birth of big pharma, this is who Bill Gates is, and these can live on their own out in the world. And we're now starting to dissect Plandemic 3 to do the same thing, so that we can send it to people in bits and pieces. Because there's some people who want to wake up their family members, or and they just want just the one part. They won't sit down through an hour and whatever movie, but they will watch the part about Canada. And um, and so that Canadian part is going all over Canada right now. And I'm getting a lot of messages from Canada saying thank you, because it's hell. We are living in hell right now. And this was one of the freest, most beautiful countries just a couple years ago.
Hmm.
I love your
Well,
juxtaposition. That's something that Mark has been doing a lot of, especially we have in the shows of like LBJ and Joe Biden, and a lot of similarities between them.
Yes.
Mark has brought up, and I love that you juxtapose that, and that led into one of my next questions. G. Edward Griffin, what brought you to him and that footage?
Yeah. Well, as I said in the movie, after I came off tour with Bernie, I started to really dig in deep and learn, what is Marxism? What is it really? And what is socialism really? Forget about democratic, which I also learned a lot about democracy, and how many of the world's top philosophers were against it and why. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I always thought that was the golden goose, but yeah, you're right. It does kind of lead to mob rules, doesn't it? And so after Plandemic 2, went deeper in the rabbit hole, because I knew that at that time we're going to do a 3, and I didn't know fully what it was about, but I figured it was going to be a continuation of 2, and kind of go deeper into COVID and the true numbers, and originally it was going to really show everybody, like, here's what we said in Plandemic 1, and here's what the media said about it, here's what fact checker said about it. Now 2 years later, check it out. Everyone agrees that it was man-made, gain-of-function research, all the paid for by the NIH, $3.7 million, everything we said. Now people are starting to talk about it. I thought it would be kind of a reaction to all of that. But as we were digging into it, and unfortunately, I'd already done a lot of interviews at that time with, amazing people that didn't make it into the movie, Peter McCullough and a lot of notable people. But it was mostly centered around the truth of the numbers, and how the true genocide that unfolded as a result of this big lie. But as I've learned to monitor the mainstream media, the kind of the global narrative, I've learned to pay close attention to that, and realize that whatever it is that they keep talking about on loop is what they want us focused on. And that is, and when you play that game, all you're really doing, even if you're calling them out, is you're following their directive. And so, for instance, I had information by Plandemic 2 about the truth about masks, and how they work and don't work, and how damaging that they would be. But I chose to leave that out, because I realized, well, that is such a hot button subject that they're going to obsess upon that. That's going to be the one thing they're going to direct everyone to, and they're going to miss the fact that we just showed you who owns the patents, and who's collecting the money. And so I said, let's not play their game. All they're talking about is masks, and they're intentionally going back and forth. They know how to dominate the news cycle by saying one week they totally work, everyone should be wearing them. The next week they're actually not effective at all. Only people doing surgery should be wearing them. Then everyone's, did you hear this? And everyone now, all the dialogue is now completely overcome by this subject that they want us to be distracted by. So I've learned that enough that I said, we're about to make the mistake and follow their directive and talk about what they want us talking about. Let's not go there.
Well, if there's any indication of how much of a full court press this was, they even incorporated late night talk show hosts into the narrative.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
just think about that. I mean, did they really need Colbert and those other guys doing this? It really shows you how much of a full court press it was, Mickey,
Oh,
to
yeah.
have those guys. They could have been left out of the loop and
Yeah.
nobody would have bothered to notice, but they didn't. They
Yeah.
brought those cats into the loop every single night. Kimmel,
Every night
Colbert.
it was, their directive was very, very clear.
Yeah.
Slam Donald Trump
Yep.
every chance you get and frighten people with the stats of cases and deaths and cases and deaths and cases and deaths. Keep going, keep going. And yeah, it's just so when I saw all of that, I recognized, well, that's the game. So I don't want to play that game. It's a game you can't win. So we decided. I said, let's what's the big picture here? We already knew what the big picture was, and part of me was like, well, then why aren't we exposing the big picture? We know that it's not about COVID. We know it's not even about a vaccine. We know it's about control. It's not. It didn't start in 2020. We know that it started decades ago, and we know that it's China and traders within the U.S. and other players that have been trying very hard to destroy the firewall that is the United States, that stops the globalist agenda from taking hold everywhere. And let's expose that, like what's really going on. And during that process is when I came across a 90-minute lecture from G. Edward Griffin called More Deadly Than War. And as I watched this thing, my mind was blown. My, my mind was blown because not only was he just so eloquent in his delivery, but he wasn't giving any opinion at all. It was just, and let me read to you the next chapter from this book and this manifesto and this communist manifesto. This is what they say they're going to do. So suddenly I'm back in the 60s going, wow. So this man, before this stuff was in our face, he was telling everyone they actually spelled out what they're going to do. Be aware, this is what they're going to do. They're going to defund the police. They're going to burn down the cities. They're going to create race riots. They're going to create autonomous zones where they take over complete parts of certain cities. They're like, and I'm hearing this thinking, all of this is happening. So what you mentioned earlier about the comparisons, I just saw it in my mind immediately. I was like, we need to show split screen where he's on one side saying what's happening, and then we're actually showing it in detail what's happening, that it's happening to us right now. And we were warned, but we didn't listen.
Well,
And it's,
we did an episode on Abby Hoffman, and Abby once famously said, when fascism comes to America, it's not going to come in the steel gray jack boots of the Third Reich. It's going to come in the fuchsia colors of Disney. And
that's,
nothing could be more prophetic than when Abby
yeah.
said that. And he was coming
What
from
year
the
was that?
left.
What year was
I
that?
think he said it in
68.
1977. No. It was like in the late 70s when he was on the run writing his book, uh, uh, Steal This Movie or whatever it was later called, which didn't become a movie. But that's where he came up with that phrase.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm putting that down. I'm going to look at, I don't know that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
he was right. He was absolutely right. It was going to come through comedy. It was going to come through your footage of Bernardine Dorn. I was saying to my girlfriend the other night that Bernardine Dorn, I think it was in your movie. You had
Yeah.
footage of right? Okay. Bernardine Dorn was the one who came up with the sign of the fork, as you know, Mickey, who said to eat your parents. She was the one who said to kill your parents and eat them with the sign of the fork. And was the lover of Bill Ayers, who later ghost wrote Obama's memoir. He put in certain things into Obama's memoir that he wrote to remain there as signs that he was in there. And Bill Ayers famously said that he put in nautical references because he had been a merchant seaman in Obama's memoir, so he could point out to his friends that he did this. And Obama had no nautical connection to anything, and he stuck those in there as little Easter eggs. Yeah, and he tried to he tried to get more money out of Obama for the book, which had gone, and sold X amount of copies. And he had been given, I imagine, a flat rate on the book. and Obama boxed him out, would never talk to him again, and just kept him, iced out for the rest of the time that Bill Ayers was in Chicago. Keep in mind, I mean, both Dorn and Ayers worked to get Obama elected in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah, fascinating.
a
Yeah,
reach back to the late night thing. One observation: it makes a lot of sense that you get late night peddling the narrative, because that's the last thing every person
right.
sees
Oh,
in the
before they
day.
go to sleep.
Go to
Yeah,
sleep in fear.
yeah.
So first thing,
Well,
waking up,
or
good morning.
laughing
Okay.
about it. They were laughing too about
Sure.
the Trump stuff and the dancing hypodermic needles, Mickey, that Colbert had on. I mean, stuff that was like
But think how,
surreal. I
but
mean,
exactly, surreal, like a dream. I mean, think about
yeah.
what that does. You literally are just watching that, and in the middle of the night, you're probably dreaming about dancing syringes. And oh my God, did I get my shot? Did I get the booster? Did it
And
happen?
I'll tell you something. I once went and pitched a movie over at I think it was MGM, and the guy said, he was a gay guy, and he said I was pitching something, I forget what it was, but he said, "Can I pitch you a movie?" And I said, "Yeah, go on, whatever." And he said, "I had a dream last night, and it was about dancing Judge Ito's in the OJ case, dancing in a musical, and they're dancing around, and he's serious, and this is around the time of the OJ trial." And he says, so it's a musical, and all the judges are dancing and singing, OJ did it, OJ did it, whatever it was. And I said, let me just think about that. I'm going to go to the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom, got in my car, and drove away. Just something like you would do in terms of the Marlboro Man. And had to pay for my own parking. But it was so absurd. It was like Hollywood on steroids absurd that I didn't even come back from the men's room, Mickey. I just went home, saying
Wow.
this is the
Wow.
craziest fucking thing I've ever heard.
Crazy.
Dancing Judge Ito's. But there it was 20 years later,
Yeah.
dancing hypodermic needles
Wow.
on Colbert.
Mhm.
So maybe I wasn't
Then
that
then
far
you
off.
have the Jimmy Kimmels and people like that, known for being, funny, good-hearted guys out there
Mhm.
saying things like, they support people who are unvaccinated being
Oh,
denied
yeah.
medical
Yeah.
service and making a joke out of
Yeah.
that. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
to really like stop for a second, man, and
Yeah.
listen
Yeah.
to what you're saying. You're saying if
Yeah.
they're vaccinated, come right in. And then what he say in his joke? And Wheezy, the guy trying to have trouble breathing, good luck, man. Like you're on your own. Don't give him any hospital treatment if somebody is on their last breath and it's someone's father, someone's husband, someone's grandfather. And he's making a joke about it, but that's how he feels. And
Yeah. I mean, his wife is the producer of that show, and I'm sure that's the way she feels also.
yeah, it's really, and that's why I also chose to spotlight the history of dictators and how they have used their people, to do their dirty work, to do their bidding, and chose to focus on the subject of mass formation and mass hypnosis because I don't necessarily, jump right away to these. They're all evil or whatever. They're captured. They're
Mhm.
hypnotized, and I have to have compassion for them because I was one of them. I never had thoughts like that about my fellow human being,
Oh,
but
I was over there before you. I mean, I voted for Obama twice. So, I mean, you're talking to a guy who was an
wow,
investigative reporter for the Village Voice,
yeah,
for 15 years, Mickey. So
yeah,
I know what they're like over there. I mean, I'm a David Horowitz myself,
yeah, yeah.
coming over to this side. So I completely understand your position.
And the good news, the upside is this: is people are waking up, and I'll give you one example of an awakening that really took me by surprise. There's an online group that's been around forever called the Young Turks. And
Ah,
Yeah, I know.
if there ever was a poster children for the communist movement and hate and division, it would be the Young Turks. I actually liked them when I was on the road with Bernie Sanders, and as soon as I woke up, I looked at them and I just thought, wow, they where do they get their information? And it's always the question of, do they know, or are they just captured? And just recently, the co-host, Anna, has been making these videos because she came out to say, I'm not a cis woman, I'm not a birthing person, I'm a woman. And then she got so attacked for simply saying that she was a woman that it kind of jolted her awake. And now she just did a podcast where she's actually saying, I went hard against Kyle Rittenhouse, and now I realize that the media that I consume and that's shown to me only shows one side of the story, and so I've been wrong a lot, and I've had to come out to admit it, and now I'm getting attacked for admitting that I was wrong.
Oh, it's
You know,
heated.
eh
It's heated up. The Stitch and Adam
yeah,
podcast came out just a couple days ago. They are pillaring her, and I really
Mhm.
hope that everyone in our audience, because I tweeted about this earlier too, give people grace. I
yes.
can't stand it when somebody is changing their mind or they're coming around and people are immediately yelling grifter. There's people on the right that are yelling grifter, people on the left automatically will say grifter. And the problem is this: Anna Kasparian is still on the Young Turks. She's still on a progressive network. Cenk Uyghur's not changing his tune at all.
Mhm.
And everything she's doing right now is damaging to her finances, damaging to her career. She'll
Mm.
never get hired by the Daily Wire. She has nowhere else to go. So this really comes across as somebody who is trying to change and be open and discuss things with others. And I only hope, and I'm deliberately saying this because I'm really worried about it, let her talk and welcome her and others
Mm.
who want to come out and share.
I'm a
Mhm.
100% with you, and this is only
Mhm.
because when I witness what she's doing, I know it's sincere because that was me, and she's just a little bit coming out later than I
Yeah, it's just taken
and
different. Not everybody converted at the same time.
no,
You
no,
know,
exactly,
it's taken whatever time it takes for people to do the research and come
and
away with it.
nothing is it's even more powerful when someone comes from that far on
Yeah,
that
Mhm.
on that
yeah,
side.
that
It's
far.
even more powerful when they then start speaking out, and
Well, look at David Horowitz. I mean, his split with the left was when he learned that the Black Panthers had murdered his secretary, and the other white progressive said, "Hey, you got to break a few eggs, David. What's the problem?" That
yeah,
was it. They murdered his secretary, and he said, "I got to get out of here." So
yes.
that was it for David Horowitz. I mean, it takes what it takes for each individual person. You know.
Yeah, that's right, and so I'm with you. I think people need to give her the grace and the benefit of the doubt that she is absolutely risking a lot and getting a lot of flack because of it. And even if it was a grift and she thinks that I've read people say, oh, because she knows that the Young Turks are going down. It doesn't matter to me. If as long as she's coming out to drop that narrative and to call it out, and even if that's not what's driving her, but even if it was, welcome those people, because the more we can, I can imagine. I was welcomed. I was hated by the far left and progressives when I spoke out against Bernie, but all that did was helped me. That made it easier for me to leave that party because there was no allegiance. There was no. I didn't get any credit for what I had done. It didn't matter. It was
No.
you either fully with us at all times or you're fully out and you're the enemy.
Well, that's totalitarianism, as you're
It
well
is.
aware. I mean, there are guys who are trying to crawl back in there now, like Berenson and people like Taibbi, who just can't accept the fact that they've been disowned by the left. They just can't accept, and famously, and I love Taibbi's reporting, but he famously denounces Trump every public statement, every public appearance he makes. He's got to do a Zig Heil that he is against Trump, and it's sickening. And the same thing with Alex Berenson. He's on Tucker a million times. Tucker makes him into a national star, and the next thing you know, he's denouncing every single thing on the right and trying to get back in with the left. They don't take you back, do they, Mickey?
They don't, and I just don't understand why anyone would want to be back. I just did a roundtable with my friend Robert Kennedy Jr. last week,
Mm.
Hmm.
and I was very honest on the roundtable because I said your campaign has me very conflicted because
Hmm.
I know you as a friend, and he's a wonderful human being. And I said, and I just don't understand how we can assume that the party that just orchestrated the greatest crime against humanity ever,
It's insane. It's
that,
like
that
running as a liberal for the Third Reich. It's
it's
like,
really like, someone said to me, "Oh, I think he wants to reform the party." And I said, "What would you think?"
right.
I said, "I want to run for the president of the KKK because I want to reform it."
Right. That's what
It's
it sounds like to
you
me.
you can't you don't understand it, and if you think that that's possible, there's no way that it is what it is. It was built to be that way. It always has been. There was never a big switch. All that stuff is a lie. You need to understand that it is what it is, and let that party die because it's doing great damage. And I come from that party, so it's like, but there's for me, there's just no, I don't compromise. I don't. There's no amount of money, as I've told a million times. I was offered $17 million to share for a short period of time to share the licensing of Plandemic Series for like 4 months, and then it was all revert to me, back to me, and I turned it down. And so there's just no compromising for me, and the reason is this: is because I think that the people that are at the helm of these wicked agendas, I don't think they started that way. First and foremost is I think they were. I think we have a real parenting issue, and that because if you raise people, if they're raised properly with a strong mother and a strong father, lovingly and strong, I don't think they'd be able to do what Bill Gates does or what George Soros does. And when you understand who all their fathers are, there's a very interesting archetype. You know, Bill Gates's father being a monopolist and an attorney and a head of the of the on the eugenics board of America, head of Planned Parenthood board, and you understand that the apple doesn't fall from far from the tree. You have that aspect of it, and then you have um, that there's so much temptation when if you're void of something, if you're void of the love that you needed or the emotional support or whatever it is, then it becomes this surge towards trying to find a way to complete yourself. And so we have so many men out there that think that they need to conquer. They need to, okay, let me see. I have 12 houses, that didn't work. I have a collection of fine automobiles, that didn't do it. I have 4 yachts, that didn't do it. So let me now conquer a nation. Let me conquer people. Let me try. At what point am I going to feel good about myself? And so you have this at the core, and most of them through incremental temptations, they have sold out. And so I realize that. I realize I've watched really good people, friends of mine who came into Hollywood, and within 5 or 6 years, they weren't the same people. They looked similar, but their entire, they came from Iowa or whatever with, God in their heart and love for people. And next thing you know, it's just all about like, you know, ma getting famous and scoring the awards and whatever it might be. And so I look at that and I think, the only way that we're going to be able to fight that is by not becoming it. And all these temptations that have come my way, I just see them as a temptation to steer me off my path. And the more I've stayed true, and it's been tough sometimes, particularly when that $17 million came in. It's like we had lost our house in the Thomas fires of California just 2 years before, and we weren't insured and lost all of our gear. I was trying to get all of my film gear back, and I really could have used the money. And it was a real decision I had to make of like, this feels like it's that golden carrot being dangled to see if I can stay true to this mission and not sell out. And so that's what I tell everyone. It's like the two things that I advise everyone to do right now. And I don't like to give life advice too often, but I say, never sell out and do everything you can to get canceled.
This is like the
That's too good.
perfect
Those
ending.
two.
This is it.
These are two. These are two good pieces of advice. I met Bobby Kennedy for the first time. We were both at the Sirhan parole hearing, and I was able with him to get Sirhan paroled, and we were both fairly knowledgeable on the case. And the parole board agreed to finally parole this guy, and what we didn't see was that 2 of his relatives would go to Newsom to have the parole reversed by Gavin Newsom, who claimed to be a big fan of the Kennedy clan, a big fan of Robert Kennedy, his father, and reversed his own hand-picked parole board, Mickey, in pardoning Sirhan. And so, I mean, I know where Robert Kennedy Jr. comes from in terms of the events of the 60s and 70s in this country. But there's also a new breed of an anti-Kennedy, which is the face of Gavin Newsom, which is what we're going to have to deal with. This type of phony liberal Trudeau Newsom look that is out there. The what I said, the fuchsia colors of Disney are reflected in the faces of Gavin Newsom and Pierre Trudeau's son up there in Montreal.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I mean, what you said, I think, is a beautiful summation. Great advice. Thank you so much for your time. And I'm looking forward to the next Plandemic, or what do you have coming next?
Yeah, I've just decided about 4 days ago what my next film is going to be. I can't announce it yet, but it's I've done my best to. I always get very disappointed when you get excited about a movie and then you go to see the sequel and it's not quite as good, and the third one is even less good. And I understand how that happens, because after the hype of Plandemic 1, I suddenly became so busy that I realized, I thought, "Oh, this is why sequels often suck," because, the filmmaker doesn't quite have the time to put their life into it the way they did before they were doing interviews and all the stuff that happens after you have a successful movie. So I've done my best to manage my life in such a way that I can fulfill my commitment to making each film better and better. And I think number three, I was very proud of number one, and then very proud of number two. And now I'm even more proud of number three, and particularly what it's achieving in the world, which it's bringing people back together. I've received messages from a lot of parents saying, "Thank you. My 13-year-old or 15-year-old son or daughter watched the movie with friends and then came to me and apologized and said, that they all that mean stuff they've been saying about how much they, how mom and dad are fascists and how America is built on genocide, how they understand that that's all part of the programming." And that's been incredibly satisfying, to know that that's happening, because for me, there's nothing more important than family. And so I do have the fourth episode of the series planned, that we've already begun researching for, and it's going to be very important. Hopefully, I can announce that very soon. And I will say to your listeners that the one reason that I've been able to give away all my movies and even my book, everything is at plandemicseries.com. And my book is totally free on there. Just download it and it's yours. No strings attached at all, is because the public has been donating to allow me to make the movies, and that's also why I don't charge them for it, because I don't feel like it's right to charge the people who helped fund them, and I also feel like this information has been stolen from the people, and all I'm doing is really returning it. But if you'd like to donate, there's a donate button at plandemicseries.com, and it would go directly to the next movie, which is going to be a bombshell.
Bravo, my friend.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, I hope you'll come back after, or after you've announced it, so you can talk about it more,
Sure.
easily than you are
I
right
I
now.
would love to. You just let me know anytime.
Absolutely, this is great. This is great meeting you.